Will Canon be releasing the R7 Mark II in the next couple of months? Or are we going to have to wait until the second half? Will they also fix the rolling shutter, increase buffer performance, and address the autofocus inconsistencies, as well as give us CF Express card slots? Well, we've got the inside scoop on this so-called baby R1, but with a smaller sensor and a slightly smaller price tag. I'll go ahead and break it down for you step by step on what we can realistically expect. And if you are serious about staying up to date on the latest camera gear, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It not only helps this channel grow, but it keeps you in the loop. Let's start with the sensor. We've heard a lot of rumors that Canon's going to take the R6 Mark III's sensor, a 24 megapixel stack sensor, and put it in the R7. But we've also heard that that sensor from the R3 is also going in the R6 Mark III. So there's a lot of people out there talking about recycling the R3 sensor. We don't really expect to see that, because if they did, well, a lot of people would be very upset, because that would result in a resolution drop from 32.5 megapixels to 24. That wouldn't really fly, and for those looking for better low light performance in high ISO, well, then you're better off going to a camera like the R3 or the recently announced and released Canon EOS R1. But going to the other end, some rumors have speculated that the EOS R7 Mark II will have a resolution of 40 megapixels. But that seems a little bit far off. We'd expect the same resolution of the R7 Mark II, around 32.5 megapixels, but that this new sensor will also be stacked. So the rumors are all over the place, so we can pretty much discount them. Now, it seems to make the most sense of all when it comes to resolution is 32.5 megapixels. A lot of people are pretty happy with that. It's a lot better than 24, but you're not going to run into some of those issues that when you're shooting with 45 megapixels. And it gives it a good, it's priced and put in a good market segment where it's not kind of bumping up against that R5 Mark II. It just doesn't make sense. The R5 Mark II costs $39.99, so don't expect the R7 Mark II to give the same sort of capabilities as the R5 Mark II, but in a flagship APS-C body. But the one thing we do expect is a whole new sensor, because, well, let's be honest, the readout speed, well, it's kind of like me. It's slow. We need something with a faster readout speed. Now, Canon Rumors has talked about it not getting a mechanical shutter based on some rumors, and I don't think we're quite ready there. Now, with the R5 Mark II, what I'm finding out that with the speed of this camera, the new sensor, the digic accelerator, and the image processor are all working together, I'm in electronic most of the time. I don't use mechanical anymore. It's fast. The images look great. And when I don't want it to be fast, well, it doesn't have to be fast. So a whole new sensor, a stacked, backside illuminated sensor with improved dynamic range that could also help us with, well, noise at high ISO. Now that would really help, and that would solve all those issues, because the R7 could produce really good images if you were shooting mechanical. And as you can see here, the mechanical speed for the R7, the Mark I, caps out at 15 frames per second, half the speed of the electronic shutter that produced really terrible rolling shutter results like the images that you're seeing here. And for the first time in an APS-C body, Canon's adding their brand new digic accelerator. Now, this chip works alongside the image processor as the AI processing chip to improve autofocus, to improve the tracking, as well as adding predictive subject tracking. So you can expect a much higher hit rate when you're shooting. And the shooting speed, well, it matches the R6 Mark II, 40 frames per second. Now, of course, that's in electronic mode. But if we've got the digic accelerator, a new and faster sensor, well, along with the digic X, that should mean that we can shoot a whole lot longer. Well, assuming one thing, that they've also increased the buffer performance. Now, none of the specifications to this point have pointed out any solutions to the buffer. They keep talking about clickbait. Well, I wouldn't say it's clickbait. It's the headline stories about 40 frames per second, 8K video, 40 megapixel sensor. That's some of the stuff that we're seeing here. And I want to kind of bring it down a little bit, because Canon's not going to produce a camera here that basically has all the same features as the R5 Mark II. It's not how Canon works. But going back to that digic accelerator, a chip that debuted with the R5 Mark II, this is going to greatly improve some of the autofocus inconsistencies that we saw with the Mark I. And that predictive subject tracking, well, that's going to work really well when shooting birds, especially when they're in flight. So from a photographer's point of view, a new sensor, stacked. Now hopefully, unlike the R5 Mark II, this stacked sensor should provide better dynamic range. Now for some strange and crazy reason, when shooting in low light environments such as wildlife at a high ISO, the R5 Mark II produces more noise than the Mark I, noticeably more noise. No matter who you follow, they're all saying the same thing. And the whole architecture behind a stacked sensor is that what you're doing is you're removing the circuitry from the top of the photosite and you're moving it to the bottom. That gives you more room at the top of the photosite, allowing for a deeper and wider well to collect more photons and trap those or convert them into electrons. And so you've got more information. Guess where? Down at that low end. Not at the highlights, because the highlights will always clip, but what you're trying to do is get more information in those shadows. So I'm really curious to see what happens with the dynamic range of this new sensor, but let's assume it's 32.5 megapixels, along with the digic X accelerator, as well as the image processor and the new sensor. That's going to solve a lot of the big problems that we had. All right, so video features really shouldn't be a surprise here. If it's got a 32 megapixel sensor, then what we're looking at is 7K oversampled 4K, not 6. 7K oversampled 4K, that provides pretty good detail. And that would give us, I would imagine that 7K oversampled 4K, well, at least up to 60 frames per second, but 4K will be capable of up to 120 frames per second. Now, I would love to see 240 frames per second, especially when shooting certain birds, but if the camera can't do it, where it looks sharp and clear, I don't really see the point, because if you're doing hummingbirds and other things, you really want to slow that motion down. You want high quality, and I think we're going to see it cap at 4K 120 frames per second. So that means 240 and 1080, right? Well, no, not necessarily. Now, the R5 Mark II does do that, but the problem is you get a very soft image, and especially in low light, it's terrible. Okay, so what about the other video specifications? Well, we've seen some rather interesting ones, but the rumors are saying something different. Canon Log 2, 40 megapixels, and 8K video. Okay, so this is where the rumors are essentially reaching for the stars. They're basically grabbing all the R5 Mark II capabilities and throwing them into the R7 Mark II. And when I see that, red flags go off all over the place, because I know Canon, they're not looking at taking all the capabilities from the R5 Mark II or the R1 and throwing them into the R7 Mark II and saying, hey, you know what? Here you go. Here's a baby R1 and a baby R5 Mark II. It's not how Canon works. Canon Log 3, sure, definitely. 10-bit 422 in most video modes. XF AVC-S and XF HEVC-S, sure, certainly. Better heat management, yes. Now, no active heat management within the camera. I don't even expect that they're going to get the same heat pipe that the R5 Mark II got, but better heat management. We saw that with the R5 Mark I with firmware 1.6. It was able to operate in high heat and do it very, very well in most video modes. But in terms of doing 8K and 40 megapixels, and yes, I know Fujifilm does this, but they also don't have an R5 out there. And so I really don't see Canon doing 40 megapixels. So anybody who's saying 40 megapixels and they're saying it's going to do 8K UHD, I'm not buying it. I really don't see that happening. Those video specifications just seem to be a bit too much. Now, again, having a new and improved sensor, that digic accelerator, means that we're going to have video that's better. It's one thing I noticed with the R5 Mark II over the R5 Mark I with that stacked sensor is a lot of times when I was shooting in 4K fine, which is basically 8K oversampled in camera 4K, is if I panned, you didn't get a lot of flicker, but you could tell that it was really pushing itself, and it almost flickered a little bit. You got that, I forgot what they call it. It wasn't ghosting, it wasn't that bad, but you got this almost flicker. But with the R5 Mark II, it's like one of those high-end cameras. You don't get that. So having an all-new stacked sensor is going to provide much better video quality in the 7K, 6K oversample, 4K, 4K up to 120, and any full HD resolution modes. Again, I don't know how far up they're going to go in frames per second. But Canon does have an opportunity here with a lower resolution sensor to push some of that stuff that the R5 Mark II can't do, because it's moving 45 megapixels worth of information every frame. That's when you're shooting with all eye, or all intra as it's now called. So what about ergonomics? Did I talk about ergonomics already? I can't remember. Let me just see. What are my talking notes here? No, I don't, because I don't think I said this point. So the ergonomics, it was one of the complaints of the Mark I. It's going to get it's going to be very similar to the R5 Mark II in terms of ergonomics. And that's a good thing. The ergonomics of the R5 feel really good in the hand. But you know what feels even better? A battery grip. So hopefully they come up with a good battery grip for the R7. Maybe, it'd be nice if we could use the R5 battery grips and get that cooling grip too, which could help in the high heat. But there is one other thing. This is a flagship APS-C camera. The R7 had dual SD card slots. We're not going to see dual CF Express Type B card slots, V3 or V4. However, I think it's highly likely, if Canon did listen to us, it's highly likely that it could get a single CF Express Type B card slot. This is not 2020. CF Express Type B card slots or cards that go in the card slots are pretty cheap. Let me find out some prices for you. They've really come down in price. Let's go to B&H here and let's do a search for CF Express. So look at here. So this is a SanDisk. It's 512 gigabytes for $179. Okay, let's scoot down a little bit more. We're seeing some other sales that are even better. No, that's not a great deal. For $299, you get a 1 terabyte. And for their Type A, it's 400. See, this is what I would like to see. This is actually a good idea. So $499 for a 1 terabyte CF Express Type A card. If there's any worry about heat, if there's any worry about approaching on the performance of the R1, the R3, and the R5, well, go ahead and support CF Express Type A. It's going to be a smaller camera body, and you get the speeds and the benefits of CF Express. For a 2 terabyte card, AV Pro SE card, V4, $599, and it has a maximum sustained write speed of 3,500 megabytes per second. I believe them, you're not going to need it. The R5 Mark II, 8K 60 frames per second, won't even come close to that. The Red V Raptor shooting 8K 120 frames per second is somewhere around 850 megabytes per second. So shooting video, you're not going to come close to that maximum sustained write speed. Okay, so what about stills? Well, now things can get interesting. So if you're shooting, let's say, 20 frames per second lossless RAW on the Nikon Z9, it'll chew up about 1.2 gigabytes per second. So if you did 40, again, this is at 45 megapixels, that would be 2.4. So you start to get up to some really crazy numbers with lossless uncompressed files. Thankfully, the price for the Angelbird V4 cards is the same as the V3. But if you're looking at thinking, oh, maybe I should get the V4 cards, the only place you're going to benefit from those cards if you're taking content off the card onto your computer, assuming your computer can handle those speeds. In that case, you benefit from the cards, but in the camera, there's no benefit. All right, so what have I forgotten here? Let's go back to my talking notes. Oh yes, the EVF. I think it's highly likely that it's going to get an EVF at around 5.76 million dots, what we saw in the R5 Mark I, and that camera's still for sale, so why not use that part? Now, I could get the one that's in the R5 Mark II, but that comes with eye-controlled autofocus. I tried setting it up once, and yeah, it's not good. I would like it to work, but I couldn't get it to work. The LCD, no surprises there. We don't have the resolution. What I would really like to see with this is a Sony-style 4-axis, or even better, 5-axis LCD that we see in the A7 R5. When you're shooting with a telephoto and you're out there on a tripod in the field, you want to flip that LCD out back so it's in line with the lens. When it's out to the side, it doesn't work. There have been rumors of the R6 Mark III also getting like a 4-axis or 5-axis LCD, a redesigned LCD. That would be huge here. The biggest complaints with the R7 Mark I, well, first off was the performance in electronic shooting with, well, a really high readout speed that produced unwanted results. Then there were certain inconsistencies with the autofocus system. There were complaints about dynamic range, ergonomics, and of course, that buffer. So even if you were able to shoot at 30 frames per second because your pigeon was nailed to the perch, you'd fill up in essentially a second. A stacked sensor, the Digic accelerator chip, and the Digic X image processor will solve the electronic shooting performance issues, and improved ergonomics will provide another checkbox. But we don't have any validation about the dynamic range, the sensor specifications, or the video specifications. So this leads me to one conclusion. Instead of getting this camera announced in the next couple of weeks, or in the next 4 weeks, we're probably going to have the announcement of the R7 in the second half. Now, my hopes are that it's going to happen sometime in July or August, or at the very worst, September. But there's a pretty good chance we might have to wait until Q4, and I really hope we don't. But what matters more than anything else is that these cameras are fully baked when they're released. Canon EOS R1 was fully baked, and very few people are complaining about the camera or any lenses that it's hooked up to. Although some people aren't too happy with how it's performing with a 400mm f2.8. But then there's the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, a camera that I absolutely love. But there's an awful lot of complaints about the battery performance, issues with the PCB in relation to the battery. There's a lot of discussions out there regarding that. And then, of course, there's inconsistencies with the autofocus since firmware 1.0.3 came out. Better testing, better QA, QC, getting the right people involved so they can test it in many different scenarios. It's great testing it in-house, but when you're testing in-house, I'll tell you how things go, guys, because I used to run this in-house. And what happens is you have scripts, because you have to cover off everything. You have so many things that you have to test. So you come up with scripts and you give them to people. And a lot of times the people doing the testing never would shoot with an R5. Maybe they don't even shoot cameras and all they shoot is with an iPhone. All they know what to do is to follow what's within the script. And that isn't a good way of testing. When I worked at one company, I can't tell you what we did, but what I can tell you is when I first started to, how should we say, get involved with the QA and QC, I immediately, after an hour, went to the VP and said, "You're testing wrong." And I said, these people need to know how the product works. They need to use it. And what we need to do is spend some time. What we did is we took out 2 hours every Friday and we used the goods. And you know what? We better detected bugs. We saved a ton of money. Because if you catch the bugs early on, you're going to save yourself thousands and $1 million later down the line. And the issues that Canon's having with the batteries right now, that's got to be costing them a pretty sum. I know that to fix some of the issues, people are sending their cameras in and getting the PCBs replaced. So I would like to see it in 2 weeks. I'd like to see it in 4 weeks. I don't want to have to wait till the second half, but I want to get a camera. But the point I'm getting at with the timeline, what this tells us is that these specifications that we're getting, some of the wild ones, they're there because there's lack of any real leaks. And that's what we're seeing. Canon is doing a much better job of, well, plugging all the leaks. That's leaving us with very little information other than patent applications. And what happens? Well, then you see a lot of channels, some computer generated, where they just make up stuff. And sometimes they don't even do a good job of it. They'll just say, oh, look, Canon R5 Mark II, let's grab a bunch of those and stick them in here. Let's grab something from the Sony a7 IV. So I hope I've been able to provide you a more realistic view as to what we can see in the R7 Mark II. I think Canon rumors, or Craig Blair is really onto something here, is that this is going to be a baby R1 in terms of how Canon used to look at the 7 series. It's going to be better built. It's going to have a really solid center. It's going to aim for pros. And it's going to be a camera you're going to want to buy. It's a camera that I'm going to want to buy. If you have any questions about anything I've said in this video, go ahead and put them in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think. I was really hoping this camera would be out now. And actually, we were supposed to have the R6 Mark III, the R7 successor, all right in the second half, and that hasn't happened. And of course, we've got some other issues right now with tariffs. But as we saw with the Mavic 4 Pro, we're seeing huge price increases right now. I think it's $26.99 for the base Mavic 4 Pro, and you can get them cheaper outside of the country. So the tariffs are having an impact, but you got 30% tariffs on the Chinese stuff. Japanese only have 10%. I expect that to have an impact on price. I do think that the R7 Mark II is still going to come in under $2,000, but it's going to be more expensive than the Mark I, and not just because of foreign exchange rates, tariffs, and all that other stuff, but because Canon is going to build this to be a better camera, what the R1 or the R7 Mark I should have been. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching to the very end. If you're one of those loyal subscribers that's interested in getting behind the scenes and learning a little bit more, well then go ahead and click join and take a look at that new, well, insider level where I shoot videos behind the scenes, giving you a glimpse into what exactly does happen behind the scenes. Anyhow, thank you so much for tuning in. Have yourself a great day, and we'll see you again soon.